NFL free agency is right around the corner, and the Indianapolis Colts have plenty of moves to make. Tonight, we're going to dive into the guys that have already been on the team, who's going to return, and who has played their last down as an Indianapolis Colt. Well, let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com. My name is Andrew Moore, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow writer at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, we're going to take a little bit of a break from the quarterback talk. I mean, I feel like that's what all of our
what?
episodes...
It's possible to do so?
all of our episodes have surrounded quarterback talk. It's free agency has kind of gotten missed in all of this, but less than a week away, the legal tampering period begins on Monday. So we're going to dive into it. But first, how you doing, man? How's your week been? And got anything planned for this weekend?
We're moving soon, not far away, but me and my girlfriend Aubrey are going to be looking at some houses this weekend. But do got to say it's nice to be shifting away for a moment from the quarterbacks and the draft, because we still have like 50 days of that. So nice to talk about something else for a little while. I'm excited.
Right. It is going to be exciting. We got already people in the chat as always. Taryn, good to see you, buddy. I know you were a little bit late last week, but we always love when Taryn joins the show. Quentin, good to see you, buddy. Steve is here. We got Bradley in the chat already talking about Yannick Ngakoue. We're going to be talking about Ngakoue tonight. Nabeed is here. We've got Mitchell. All of you guys. Mitchell's all the way from New Orleans. Good to see you, man. So yeah, we're gonna have fun tonight talking about some free agents who might be back, who we'd like to see back, but might be a little bit overpriced. We'll have to see. Colts loyalist, always good to see you, man. And guys, listen, we're almost there. Literally almost there. I'm going to check it right now for you guys. As of right now, we are at 969 subscribers, literally 31 subscribers away. So if you haven't done so already, or even if you have, go tell somebody else to go ahead, hit that subscribe button on YouTube for Horseshoe Huddle. Hit that bell so you know whenever we're going live, and then go follow us on all the rest of the things. Go ahead and follow at Colts on FN on Twitter, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, and then you're all covered. You're all covered. And remember, this old head right here is going Chrome Dome as soon as we get to 1K. So very well could be next week, which is a little nerve-wracking to me to think like, hey, it's actually coming where there's going to be no more head or no more hair on this head. We got Camden in the chat, of course, the third member of the show, Stats Matt. Sarah, good to see you. Lawrence, great to have you back. You did have an episode with Paris Campbell, so it's going to be fun. We're going to get to talk about all of these guys. And then our guy, Logan Schmidt. Good to see all of you guys. So without further ado, we've kept you guys waiting long enough. Let's dive into it. So the ultimate question is, which Colts free agents will return for the 2023 season? Drake, before we dive into each individual player, the Colts right now currently have $12.7 million in cap space, but we all know that Matt Ryan and Nick Foles are going to be released before their roster bonuses kick in, and that'll probably be the third day of the league year. Just by cutting those two guys, the Colts will go up to around $32 million in cap space. And the Colts can always make more room if they decide to, by restructuring different contracts or else releasing some other guys, things like that. But the Colts are going to have plenty of cap space to make some moves. I don't think, as we all know, it's probably not going to be massive moves by Chris Ballard. And we'll talk about the outside free agents next week on Monday's episode. But they're going to have some flexibility to be able to bring some guys back.
Well, and that's a good thing. I mean, and Ballard has always, at times he's saved too much money, and he hasn't really, pulled the trigger when he should with actually spending the money. But in this situation, he's going to be a little bit smarter with who he re-signs, and I think you're going to see some free agent signings. I mean, like you said, they're not going to be these, big firework displays. First off is because there's outside of Lamar Jackson, it falls off significantly for the free agents and like the superstardom of any of the top guys. So I do think that there's some space where he's going to open up even past like $40 million potentially. And he's going to spend some money to make sure, especially that Will Fries and Raymond are ready.
Right. And why, as Wyatt says here, it'd be a shame to lose EJ Speed and Bobby Okereke. And it's definitely a possibility. Both those linebackers played great. I expect at least one of those guys to be gone. We'll see if a second one is. And Colts Loyalist says we can start that. Wyatt is here. Always love to have Wyatt Law. But hey, Camden's got it right. Paris Campbell's got to come back. And he's the first guy that we're going to talk about tonight. Paris Campbell. I mean, he had his best season up to date last year. He was able to stay healthy, and even amongst the quarterback turmoil that the Colts had, Paris Campbell was still able to be that statistically that number 2 wide receiver for the Colts. So Drake, do you think Paris Campbell returns, or why should Paris Campbell return to this Colts team?
I absolutely think that they're going to make a deal. I think that it's probably going to be something like 2 years. Now, the money that's going to be, I think, worked out because Campbell probably, as always, thinks that he is up here. The Colts are like, hey, we kind of want you down here. So they got to work that out. But I do think that they're going to re-sign him. One, I know that he's been healthy for one season, really. But that season, he had 63 catches for 623 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was a blanket at times for Matt Ryan and company. But he also knows the organization. He knows the Colts very well. He knows the building very well. He'd be invaluable at the slot position, especially healthy with a rookie quarterback. And he has Shane Steichen, who, and I quote, said he wants to have a more vertically explosive offense. And I think that that's going to suit Campbell well. So I think they should definitely re-sign him.
Nomadic Brian says we'll always have Paris. Allen, good to see you, buddy. Says
Nice.
Bring Campbell back. Yeah, I mean, I think that the Colts will make a concerted effort to bring Paris Campbell back next year. I think that it's not going to cost them a lot of money. He's not going to command top wide receiver money. And I also don't think they need to dish out like a 4 or 5 year contract to Paris Campbell either. I think we could see a 2 to 3 year deal, possibly in the range of, say, maybe 25 to 27 million.
That'd be perfect.
With incentives, with like injury incentives, to just so that way, if he does play those games, I mean, it can keep climbing. And I think that's something that I think that's a fair number for Paris Campbell, to pay him around on average $9 million a year, and for a starting level wide receiver that's not on a rookie deal, I think that'd be a very good deal for Paris Campbell. Obviously, I think that the Panthers are going to look at Paris Campbell because we all know Frank Reich's affinity for Paris Campbell and what he wants to, and his big push to even draft Paris Campbell on draft day. But I think just kind of where the state of this team is, and with the Colts needing to focus on a quarterback, not to mention this free agency class of wide receivers isn't that great top to bottom. I think the Colts will make a push to bring Paris Campbell back.
Well, and we've seen him. I mean, you saw a snippet of it with Carson Wentz, but you've seen him use those turbo boosters to beat people deep. Then in last year's offense, where you had to get that ball out quick because there was hardly any mobility, and then if Ellinger was in there, there was just the pocket presence that he didn't quite have down yet. You had to get rid of that ball quickly. That's why both him and Pittman averaged literally under 10 yards per catch. So he'd be used correctly where his strengths are at their finest, and he's also proven he can be a little bit of a volume receiver, which in the slot is invaluable for a rookie.
Yeah, and as Lawrence says here, he was one of the best in the NFL at separation, a good catch percentage, and the only wide receiver to play all 17 games last year. So, wow. Yeah, I'm sure
that is shocking.
I'm sure as far as placing a priority on the free agents, that the eternal free agents, Paris Campbell is top of the list for the Colts. But let's talk about another wide receiver, a guy that's been somebody that has been the do-it-all guy in Ashton Doolin. Drake, do you think Ashton Doolin is back with the Colts next year?
Well, given their depth, yes. I do think that he's back. I think you're going to get him on a cheap, and well, obviously you'll get him on a cheaper deal than Campbell. But the thing about Doolin is when healthy, he can be a solid depth piece. And he also reminds me a little bit of Zach Pascal when it comes to blocking. He does have some good blocking ability. He also has that athletic build that Ballard loves, and I think that him and Campbell are essential. And I think you're going to see Doolin get more playing time because you'll have him, Campbell, Pittman, and Pierce on the outside there, and you'll have Doolin and Campbell could really work the slot. Doolin is a like you said, he's a Swiss Army knife. He also plays some special teams. I think he's invaluable. I think they need to resign him.
Yeah, I think that they're letting the market kind of determine these guys' worth, and that's something Chris Ballard has always usually done. But I think again, you could get Ashton Doolin back for on the cheap, maybe even just another 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal. But yeah, I mean, Ashton Doolin is very good on special teams. He's your best blocking wide receiver, and I think that matters. That's going to matter for Shane Steichen and this offense with their creative running packages. So I would expect Ashton Doolin to be back. I think the Colts again will make that a priority. So and Stats Matt, he said he could only do so much when the Colts were one of the lowest percentage teams at taking shots at explosive plays. You're absolutely right. So now we're going to move it along to some of the offensive tackles, and I think Drake and I are going to differ a little bit on one of these guys, but let's start out with Matt Pryor. I think we all have the answer on this one. No. Matt Pryor will not be back with the Indianapolis Colts. He had all the opportunity in the world to lock up a starting spot. They gave him every opportunity at guard, at tackle, and it just got worse and worse as the season progressed. I don't think Matt Pryor is even going to be in talks with the Colts to return next year.
Well, this will sound like it's a little bit of going in on the guy, but they made a mistake and this would have been anybody that they were unsure about. They made a mistake by allowing Pinter to just start at right guard. And he was fine in training camp. And then they said the same thing about Pryor, and they both were not ready for that kind of responsibility. And Pryor this is just fact. He was terrible. I mean, he was terrible. And I can't imagine Quentin Nelson having to, I actually wrote a piece on this, how his numbers could be skewed to make him look like he was regressing a little bit more than people were saying, because at any given time, the left side's collapsing on your left side. So, I mean, your blocking is not going to look as good when the left tackle isn't performing. But for me, it's no. I think that he probably could be a good depth piece, maybe on a different team, but I think he's played his last snaps with the Colts for sure.
As Logan Schmidt says, Pryor to the GOAT. I mean, hey, he helped he embraced the tank. That's for sure.
Whether willingly or on purpose.
Right. Nomadic Brian said, Matt just not getting it done. Moving along. Is he talking about stats, Matt? Because I mean, hey, we are known about stats, Matt. Sometimes he likes to just mail it in. No, I'm just kidding, buddy. But as you right here, might be in the USFL in a few weeks. Not a crazy idea, to be honest with you. So let's move it along to the next offensive tackle. This is a guy that a lot of fans thought should get an opportunity when the carousel was happening. Dennis Kelly. And he did get a little bit of an opportunity, but then it seemed like he was more used just as kind of the emergency tackle. Do you think the Colts will retain Dennis Kelly next year?
I actually had to think about this one. I think they do, because while they do still need to bring in someone to compete with Raymond, I do think that Kelly, who, by the way, can pretty much play anything, I think that he would be a nice kind of emergency, kind of like you just said, that's a perfect word for him. Emergency tackle, emergency lineman. He's almost like a utility player in baseball. Put him out on the field, they can play any type of field position. It's the same with him outside of maybe center. I mean, he could be a nice piece, a nice depth spot, just in case the injuries really pile on. I think that it'd be a decent signing.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. But I don't think he's back with the Colts. And here's why. I think just as much as the Colts probably aren't going to pay him what he's probably looking for, Dennis Kelly, from everything I've heard, was not happy with the Colts last year. He came here. He did everything that he was supposed to in practice. And even when they were getting all of these, having all these troubles at the tackle spots, Dennis Kelly was never really given the full opportunity to go prove himself. It was this coaching staff and this front office stuck with Matt Pryor way too long. Now, when you get Bernard Raymond in there, at that point, it's like you're understandable. You want your rookie to play, but even before that, I mean, Dennis Kelly wanted a chance to go out there and play and never got that. So I think Dennis Kelly, it's going to be on him probably thinking, I don't want to be back in Indianapolis just to go through the same merry-go-round that I was put through last year. Stats Matt says, turn him into what we did with Spriggs, which I think turned out to be a mistake, keeping Kelly over Spriggs. And yeah, I mean, I liked what Jason Spriggs brought to the Colts. I thought he was going to be a nice addition, and the Colts ended up cutting him. Lawrence says, I think Indy gets a free agent left tackle and drafts one to compete with Raymond, and Kelly moves on. I would say that's probably more likely than Kelly staying on. Stats Matt, was it Ballard or Strausser or Reich? Probably a combination of all three, to be honest with you. But really, that's it as far as on the offensive side of the ball. Most of the other free agents are on the defensive side of the ball. Yep. We're gonna start with pass rusher and a pretty big name here. And actually, hold on. As Unboxing Mania made
I saw it too.
Is Taylor Lewan an option for the Colts? And I was going to kind of talk about this next week, but since he asked, we'll just do it here. I don't think so. And the reason for that is because I think Taylor Lewan is going to want to go somewhere where he can compete for the starting job. I think he could compete for the starting job at left tackle. But the only thing is, on top of competing for the starting job, he's going to want to be compensated for it. And I think there's plenty of other teams out there that are going to be more than willing to pay Taylor Lewan more money than what the Colts are going to be willing to offer him.
Well, and I know there were jokes about after seeing the shot-for-shot remake of the Cardi B video, an Offset video, where Taylor Lewan and Quentin Nelson were having their vacation days, but they're friends. Lewan's not going to sign with another AFC South team. I mean, I think actually I saw something from Stats Matt. That's the first and foremost thing is he's not going to do that. And second, the Colts are not going to pay him when they've got Braden Smith, who was arguably one of the best linemen last year. And then you've got a guy who could potentially be the blind side for you for cheaper. 3rd round pick, pay that guy instead. They're not.
And we got Stats Matt and Wyatt Law saying the same thing. Luan said he will never play for an AFC South team. And so that right there takes the Colts out of the running. But moving over to the defensive side of the ball, Yannick Ngakoue, a guy that I was very high on this trade last year, trading Rock Yassin for Yannick Ngakoue. He came in, had 9.5 sacks with the Colts last year. I know he dealt with some injuries here and there that kind of slowed him down just a bit. But Drake, what do you think about Ngakoue? First, do you think he should be back with the Colts? And then secondly, do you think he will be back with the Colts in 2023?
I think he should. That's an interesting way to put that. I think he should. And the reason is if you play him about 50% of the snaps, maybe the passing downs, put him, that's a great signing. Especially with a guy like Dio Dangbo, who's going to be developing, and I think that the Colts eventually are going to turn the reins over to him and pay. Will they? No. I think that his 9.5 sacks are misleading. I think that when you have DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart destroying the middle of offensive lines and driving quarterbacks your way, that everyone's like, I don't really remember a Yannick Ngakoue sack, and I'm not going in on the guy. It's just the truth that a lot of those probably were attributed to dominant defensive tackle play. And last and most important, the running defense for Yannick is it's not good at all, which warrants going back that he should probably play 50% of the snaps. Mix all that in with the fact that he's going to ask for more than the Colts will be willing to pay him. As much as Gus Bradley loves him, he's not going to be in a horseshoe.
Yeah, I mean, Yannick Ngakoue, when I thought he was going to be able to dominate opposing left tackles when you have DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart in there. But you're right, a lot of his sacks were cleanup sacks. He definitely didn't dominate or present that pass rushing presence on a consistent basis that I thought he would. And you hit the nail on the head right there. That, I mean, if you put him as strictly a pass rusher in those situations and only play him about half the snaps, I think he'd do very well. But the money that he is going to command, probably in the $13 to $15 million range per season, if you're going to do that, you need to be a guy that's going to be out there for 3 downs, and he simply wasn't. It wasn't the case last year. Could that eventually be? Sure. I mean, he is only 27 years old, so he's in the middle of his prime. But I think at this point we know the kind of player Yannick Ngakoue is. I think he's a great person, and I know that Gus Bradley loves him a lot. But I just don't think his production and his play are going to match the number that the Colts think he's worth. So I think he'll be able to get more on the open market. We'll see if he wants to take a pay cut, because then I think the Colts would keep him if he's able to come back for cheap. But I don't see that happening. So Logan Schmidt says he wants to re-sign Yannick, draft another defensive end. Stats Matt says, I think we can improve at veteran defensive end than Yannick for what he's going to want. He's the definition of a pure pass rusher, so he should only play about half the snaps. Kind of what I was saying. Nomadic Brian thinks that he could get okay numbers. Camden Roberts is in the camp that he should be brought back.
Very fair.
But it's going to be interesting. And as I don't even know how to say this name, Basil Faulty, yeah. Basil Faulty 241. Yannick will get his number, but it's time to let him go. Dial will need to take another step, and that's another thing too. When Chris Ballard talked about it, just at the combine last week, he talked about they really like where Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo are, and I think it's time that we know that Kwity Paye is going to be a starter. I think it's time for Dio Dangbo to be inserted into that starting lineup. This is year 3 of Dio's rookie year. Rookie contract, I should say, and it's now time to see what he can do, because before too long it's going to be, do you re-sign him or not? We've had Kwity out there. Now it's time for Dio to get his full starting reps and kind of go out and see if he can be a long-term solution at defensive end for the Colts.
Well, and you drafted them 2 and 3. All right, you did this for a reason. It's time to put them both out on the field. You know what I mean? It's time to, because they've been trying to get that Mathis-Freeney connection again. And I think that Dio showed a lot of potential. As you said, whenever Kwity wasn't out on the field, boy, oh boy, did you ever know it. There was no pressure from that right side of the offense. So I think that they're going to let Yannick go. I think they'll allow some other depth pieces to stay. I think they'll draft somebody, obviously, but I do think that they're going to let Yannick walk.
And as Lawrence says, I think Dio and Lewis, who signs a prove-it deal, split reps at left end next year. And that leads us into our next guy, Taekwon Lewis. Taekwon Lewis, again, came back from that massive injury in 2021, and he was balling. He was balling out, having another great year. 2022, same injury happens, opposite leg. Another huge injury. Drake, I think I'm going to go first on this one. I'd be all in for Taekwon Lewis coming back on another 1-year prove-it deal. And I know it. I get it. He's been injured the past 2 years with huge injuries to his legs. Like that's a problem. And that's something to be very wary about. But again, if he is healthy, he can kind of do what he did last year, man, he's a solid depth piece to have along that defensive line, and he'd come cheap as well.
Well, and the thing about Lewis is that he's always played at an above average level, and he just gets forgotten about. And it's because of those aforementioned injuries, which is why I say they do not re-sign him. And I don't want them to not re-sign Taekwon Lewis. I am also a huge fan of Lewis, but I think that when you can't stay off of IR for the past 2 seasons, it's very hard to convince even the most loving people like Ballard and Irsay, who, as you know, they want to keep guys like that around, to fork over the money when they know there might be somebody more, healthy out there that's younger for cheaper.
Exactly. And that's the thing. If you can bring him back, and I like what Stats Matt says here. Lewis for 1 year, $3 million, half of it guaranteed, the rest on playing time. He's great depth when
1 year would be
healthy.
perfect.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think he's going to get anything more than a 1-year deal, even on the open market, because of 2 huge, devastating injuries 2 years in a row. When that happens, I mean, no matter if it's fair or not, you are labeled as an injury-prone player, and you got to go out there and show you can be out there and stay healthy. Colts loyalist has says it's a prove it deal. Challenge accepted. Paris 2023. we'll have to see, but yeah, and I think if it's like I said, if it's a 1-year deal, very low money, and if he can get more on the open market, more power to him. But in order to come back and play for the Colts, I think you do that, and I think Taekwon Lewis loves being with the Colts. He was at that the introductory press conference for Shane Steichen, so we'll see, and we got to think about this too. Right now, there's only 2 defensive ends on the Colts roster for next year. Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo. Like, you got to have some depth, and I don't know if they're going to bring in maybe four new guys at defensive end. That just seems kind of a lot to me. So I'd say there's a higher chance that Lewis is back than Ngakoue. But let's move it along to we got one or a couple more defensive linemen that we're going to run through real quick. Ben Banogu. Finally, his rookie contract is up. Huge bust for the Indianapolis Colts. Drafted in the 2nd round, barely had any playing time, any sacks, any impact on the field. Ben Banogu is gone. He will not be back as a Colt.
Yeah, that's actually what I had in my notes. I said he has not even remotely lived up to a 2nd round pick. This is one that Ballard, I'm sure, respectfully to Ben Banogu, Chris Ballard's probably thinking, man, he was more like maybe a 7th round guy. He just tested ridiculous. Everyone probably had him higher. I think anybody at the time probably would have drafted him in the top 3.
Ben Banogu, go somewhere else from DSG. Good bar. Let's talk about another defensive end that I don't think will be back. Colin Kareem. He was a guy that was signed off of they was signed, I think, in the middle of the season, just as a depth piece. I don't see him back either.
I actually do see him back, only because I think that he's going to be cheaper, and I think that he's at least going to be able to be a depth piece, maybe even a practice squad player, maybe a defensive end 4, something like that. He hasn't really had a lot of experience. He's still kind of young. I do still think, again, that they probably signed somebody that's cheaper than Ngakoue in free agency, and they may even draft in day 3, they might draft a defensive end, maybe even sooner.
In my first mock draft that I released on Wednesday, I've got them drafting a defensive end. With how deep this pass rushing class is, I'd be shocked if the Colts don't come away with drafting at least one pass rusher, whenever that may be. Then we got one defensive tackle, Byron Cowart. I thought he was going to be a better nose tackle than he was. Again, I think the Colts move on here. Maybe they try to address getting a bigger nose tackle to back up Grover Stewart. Could be an area in the draft, but I don't see Byron Cowart being back.
I originally actually had yes, and after thinking about this one, I have to switch my response. I agree, because defensive tackle, you can probably find far better depth pieces for maybe even cheaper. They might even have some ready. They might even have some ready to go, maybe even on the practice squad. That happens all the time, where you see guys get promoted up. And that might even, again, be another place that they address in free agency, if there is a cheaper tackle out there, because you got Stewart and you got Buckner, arguably the top duo of defensive tackles in the league potentially.
Mm-hmm. And the Colts already have Eric Johnson, who, while I don't think he played very well his rookie year, to see what he does in his 2nd year, because the kid is still a hell of an athlete. So going from, I think he was from a Missouri State or a division, the very low level school, jumping up to the NFL, that's a huge jump. So we'll have to see if once he has a year under his belt now, we'll see if he can be more of a threat along that defensive line. So and then after the defensive line, let's talk about the linebackers here. couple guys that have played big roles for this defense, and we'll start with the big one, none other than Bobby Okereke. I mean, was second on the team last year with 151 tackles, really came on, and it seems like every single year since the Colts drafted him in 2019, he's gotten better every single year. He supplanted Anthony Walker as the starting linebacker, and has been the starting linebacker for a solid 2 to 3 years now. Drake not going to be cheap. If they try to bring Bobby Okereke back, do you think number 58 is going to be the starter at will linebacker in 2023 for the Colts?
Oh, how times change. I remember writing an article about this like a couple months ago saying they should. But, I understand Zaire and Bobby played very well. Okereke played very well. But on any given day, a 95% Shaquille Leonard is better than maybe 2 or 3 linebackers put together. I think that Leonard is going to be fine. I think that all signs point to go. I don't think they're going to re-sign Okereke. If I had to make a prediction, I think that he's going to go to Chicago because it's our cousin team over there, and it's Eberflus who's going to be like, all right, he's at his peak. He's finally hit that zenith of performance. He's going to get the most out of him. They have all the money in the freaking world. They're going to pay Bobby Okereke what he wants. He's not going to return.
Yeah, and stats, Matt. I'm sorry, this is Wyatt Law. Is JoJo Bowman a viable depth piece worthy of playing time other than special teams? I think JoJo Bowman could be. He's definitely a linebacker that has been waiting there. He's young. It could be an option there. Do I think he can be a starter? No. But do I think he has good backup potential? Yeah, absolutely. Stats Matt says no chance you could bring Bobby back. If you sign him for 13 mil, you'd surpass any team in the NFL for middle linebacker spending by over $9 million over second place. And that's the thing. It's not that nothing about Bobby Okereke's play is why he shouldn't be back. Bobby Okereke has simply outplayed what the Colts are able to give him. When you sign Shaquille Leonard to that huge contract, making $20 million a year, I mean, you can't pay in today's NFL. You can't pay 2 off-ball linebackers over $15 million. You just can't. And the way Zaire Franklin played last year, which on a fantastic deal, but the Colts got him an absolute steal of 3 years for $10 million. And all Zaire Franklin goes out and does is reset the tackling record for the franchise. I think the Colts will be fine at linebacker without Bobby Okereke. You get Shaquille Leonard back, who I've heard is doing very well in his recovery. He certainly thinks that he is on his way back. He thinks that second surgery did the job. He has full feeling in that leg like he hasn't had in years. Now it's just about building that strength. So I fully expect Shaquille Leonard to be back and then ready to go for next year. But then you've got Zaire Franklin in there. And a lot of times the Colts just play 2 linebackers anyway. So when you have someone like Zaire Franklin that's able to step in there, it's really hard to justify paying Bobby Okereke that amount of money. I do think he goes to Chicago.
Well, no, Okereke, he was very productive, but if you look at his statistics, he wasn't a guy who blitzed. He wasn't really a guy who did anything more than high tackle production, which I know that goes deep. That's very, very important for a lot of teams. But the Colts, they just simply can't pay him for what he could become. Like he's hit that stride at a point where they just cannot give him that kind of money. Kind of like Stats Matt said. I mean, they'd be paying their linebacking group ridiculous money, and they haven't even hit Zaire Franklin's extension, which
Exactly.
I'm sure he'll get.
Exactly. So and then that kind of moves that, but that's for Bobby Okereke. Another linebacker that I think they really could keep for the right price is EJ Speed. And this is going to be very interesting to see what EJ Speed commands on the open market, because EJ Speed is probably going to go out there and want to look for starter money or a place where he can start. And he probably would be able to start in their base package of 4-3 as a Sam linebacker right beside Leonard and Franklin. But I don't think he would be in there for the when the Colts go to nickel or anything like that. So but Drake, do you think EJ Speed is back with the Colts next year?
I think because the Colts know deep down that they're probably not going to be able to retain Okereke, they do retain EJ Speed. I think that he I think that he played well enough to warrant a little bit of a cheaper contract than what, obviously Okereke is going to ask for. I'd say something like what you mentioned with Campbell. I think like a 3-year, $24 million deal, $27 million, maybe tops, is what the Colts would pay for him. I do think that he would get more playing time. Knowing Okereke is gone, he's going to get those reps. And I think that he might even be able to play himself into a better contract shorter than 3 years.
I think we're definitely a little different money wise. I wouldn't give EJ Speed more than Zaire Franklin's extension of 3 years, 10 million. I think when you're looking at EJ Speed of him being mainly special teams guy, you thinking maybe 2 to 3 years at 8 to 9 million. If that's the case, and that's as Stats Matt says, same deal as Zaire for EJ. It's going to be different. So I don't think he's going to command that much money on the open market where he's getting close to 10 million a year, because he hasn't started enough to really command that. But if you can get him for around what you sign Zaire Franklin to, you do it all day, because then he's your third linebacker in case Franklin or Leonard goes down. EJ Speed can come in whenever, and he's proven in his career that he could do that. But then you also have EJ Speed as probably one of, if not the best special teams defender on your team, as well, as he's shown that for multiple years with his ability to block punts and get special teams touchdowns. So it's going to be interesting to see. It really is. But let's move it along to the next group, and that's the cornerback group. Drake, let's start out with a guy that came to the Colts last year because of Gus Bradley, and we basically just spent all year talking about why is he playing over Isaiah Rodgers Sr., and that's Brandon Facyson. And with Gus Bradley back, there is a chance that Facyson stays, but I don't know how high of a chance. Drake, what do you think?
I do look back on the season, and I think to myself, not Zaire Franklin, Isaiah Rodgers should have had more snaps. He should, especially when the season was evidently lost. But I will say that Brandon Facyson, no, I think that even despite Gus Bradley, he's underwhelming in almost every facet of the game. And yes, you and I talked about this. They need the depth at corner. We get it. But you don't need a liability. I know that's harsh to say, but this can be a harsh sport. Brandon Fayson's kind of a liability on any given pass play at all.
Yeah, and as StatsMatt says, don't even say it, Andrew. Here's where I think things could get interesting, and that's if the Colts decide to part with Kenny Moore.
Yeah.
If the Colts release Kenny Moore, or if the Colts trade Kenny Moore, then you're talking about a very, very light cornerback group. And I don't think the Colts are going to necessarily do that going into just the draft with not very many cornerbacks, because you can never have enough cornerbacks. So we'll see. If Kenny Moore's still on the team, I think there's a lot better if there's a better chance that the Brandon Facyson is not. But if Kenny Moore gets released or traded, who knows? They might bring him back as a depth piece and let Isaiah Rodgers Sr. actually take that starting role and kind of run with it. So we'll have to see. And there's plenty more cornerbacks out there in this free agent class that we'll talk about on Monday on the outside that I could see the Colts bringing in, not only for depth, but to compete for a starting job. So it's going to be interesting. And then there's so many cornerbacks in this draft class. I have the Colts I have mocked a cornerback to the Colts in the third. Very well could be a second round pick that the Colts use on a cornerback. But we'll talk about one more cornerback, and that is Tony Brown. Tony Brown was a guy that was a depth piece for the Colts. Was used not only as a slot corner, but he was able to play on the outside. Drake, do you think Tony Brown comes back to the Colts next year?
See, this is another one where this is the second one where I had no. But then I'm thinking, he missed 2021, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't play at all in 2021. But you really need depth. And yes, you can get a cornerback or two in the draft. You can get a cornerback or two in free agency, maybe one that makes more money, obviously, than the other, like a high level, and then maybe a medium kind of guy, or average. But I do think that I flipped my script on this one. I think that they do re-sign him because you can get him for uber cheap. And you can see what he does. And hey, if he plays fantastic to the point where he's the cornerback 3 or 4, well, then he's definitely he's overperformed what you're paying for him.
I know the Colts really like Tony Brown, and as Stats Matt had said, he was a guy that was able to come in for Kenny Moore when Kenny Moore was injured, and as Unboxing Mania said, played well in special teams, and that's always something that the Colts are going to look for. So does he get the veteran minimum? Maybe. If you're able to sign him for cheap, you could bring Tony Brown back for a 1-year deal. But I think there's going to be a lot of change in this cornerback market. And the question was asked, who is your mocked guy at cornerback? I see Stats Matt already spoiled it. Thanks, buddy. But for those that don't look at the comment section, go to horseshoehuddle.com and check out my mock draft. Go and see who I've got the Colts taking at the cornerback position. But let's kind of wrap this up here. Let's do the safety position. Rodney McLeod, great season with the Colts last year. However, is Rodney McLeod back in a Colts uniform in 2023? I know Lawrence Owens in the chat that Rodney McLeod is his co-host on the Believe in Colts podcast. Maybe he's got some insight, but Drake, what do you think?
Rodney McLeod's addition to the team, if they would have known what the hell they were doing, this would have been an incredible home run. He played fantastic football. I just don't think that they re-sign him. I think that, and it's not because they don't want him back. I think they're going to try. I think we heard this on Shad and Destin's Saddle Up podcast, actually, with Zach Kiefer, that they're going to try to say, hey, no, stay with us. But he's going to maybe want to, in the latter part of his career, go to another contender, go to somewhere where he might be able to make a little more money than the Colts are willing to pay him. That's a little more safety needy. I think Nick Cross gets the reins. I think that they're going to they really want Nick Cross to start because he originally started, but they benched him because he was not ready. So I do think that they are going to find every way possible to get Nick Cross on the field. So that mixed with the fact McLeod's going to go to a bigger contract, I don't think he resigns.
I agree. I think that the Colts want McLeod back, not only for what is his ability on the field, but as in the locker room as well. But I think Rodney McLeod, number one, I think he's probably going to go to a more of a contender than the Colts. I think he deserves that. Or he's going to look for more money than the Colts are willing to give to him. But I do think that the Colts are going to really try to bring McLeod back. Oh, yeah. But I also think at the same time, you do have to consider that you did draft Nick Cross. You moved up to get him. The Colts have plans for Nick Cross. So you're not exactly going to break the bank on Rodney McLeod when you want to get Nick Cross out there to develop. Because the best way this kid can develop is to get those live reps out there. So we'll have to see what kind of happens there. But the other safety is Armani Watts. He tore up his knee in the preseason last year. He was mostly signed as a special teams player. I don't think Armani Watts is back with the Colts this year, especially with the ascension of Rodney Thomas II.
I think that you're absolutely right. I do not think that the Colts thought that was going to be the case with a 7th rounder like Rodney Thomas II. But now that they're like, holy cow, Rodney Thomas II led the entire team in interceptions. They're like, look, we don't really need to re-sign anybody. You could bring up a practice squad guy for that kind of role. And
right.
Offense. But.
Wyatt Law asks, is Marcel Dabo going to make the jump to the 53-man? I think that he impressed the Colts. That'll definitely be something in that is decided in training camp, whether Marcel Dabo is able to make the final man roster, but the Colts liked his development throughout the year. So then we got two more guys and it's actually 2 special teams guys. So Chase McLaughlin, hell of a season at kicker. And in my opinion, he's earned it. He has earned the right to be the Colts kicker. I think you still bring in competition, but I think you give Chase McLaughlin a nice contract, and hopefully he could be the future kicker for the Indianapolis Colts. So we don't have to worry about that position anymore.
I know we got to keep it super brief, but I was really hoping I'd have more time for this. But look, Money McLaughlin, okay, loved the guy. Comes into the fray to replace somebody who was the starter. He's supposed to be the franchise kicker. 30 for 36 in field goals. This has been a guy that bounced around the NFL for years and finally just randomly lands with the Colts. He was an emergency dude. He had 21 for 21 in extra points. And get this, everyone listening, 111 points from McLaughlin. The team had 289 on the season. That means Money McLaughlin accounted for 38% of the points. Contract.
There. I don't see
Contract.
any way that the Colts do not bring Chase McLaughlin back, and he wins that kicking job for next year. And then the final one is Matt Hawk, who the Colts signed last year with Rigoberto Sanchez tearing his Achilles. Matt Hawk is not going to be back. Rigoberto Sanchez will be ready to go for training camp. He'll be ready to go for the season, and I think the Colts are happy to get their high level, in my opinion, Pro Bowl level punter back in Rigoberto Sanchez.
You go from Hunter Smith, Pro Bowler, to Pat McAfee, Pro Bowler, to Rigoberto Sanchez, Pro Bowler. There's no way in heck.
Definitely.
It should be a Pro Bowler, Pro Bowl level. Matt Hack was not very efficient with his punts, whether deep or accurate. It's going to be Rigoberto Sanchez, and Hack's going to be on the market again.
Yeah. We all love Rigo and can't wait to see him. Can't wait to see Rigo back on the field. So that was all the in-house free agents for the Colts. So it was a great discussion. Definitely think they'll bring back some others. I don't think they'll be able to bring back. So hey, it all gets started next Monday. So that's going to be fun to watch. But let's talk about, Drake, the latest Colts news. And really, there's only a little bit of Colts news, and it was just the Colts finalizing their coaching staff for the 2023 season. So let's pull that up on the screen here so you guys can all look at it. I'll take this banner down here. Here is the coaching staff for the Indianapolis Colts for the 2023 season. I'm not going to name off all the names because you can see them right there on the screen. But Drake, who are some of the coaches that you're most excited to see, and then who are some of the coaches that you're unsure about as we head into the 2023 season?
So the default's Steichen, but I'll say that three guys I'm super excited about. Cam Turner at quarterback. He helped develop Cam Newton. He helped develop Kyler Murray. I think that he's going to be fantastic with whoever they decide to draft. Reggie Wayne, number 2, retains his position as wide receivers coach. He is going to be a Hall of Famer. You're going to get that kind of insight and wisdom with young receivers like Pierce and whoever the Colts, if they do decide to draft a guy like Mingo or so. And then I do got to say, I was going to pick a couple like well-knowns, but I do like Cato June actually as the assistant linebackers coach. That's a guy who gets a little bit forgotten in Colts lore. You talk about a machine when he was playing linebacker. I think he's going to be fantastic for whether it's EJ Speed they retain or if they draft somebody else or a guy like JoJo Bowman. Excited for those three guys for sure.
Yeah, I see Logan Schmidt in the chat saying, has Cato June always been on the team? He was the assistant linebackers coach for the Colts last year. What I mean? So Cato June has been there, learning from Richard Smith, who has been a linebackers coach, I think since before I was even born. So, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of intrigue on this staff. I mean, it's just to see how Steichen, Jim Bob Cooter, and you mentioned it, Cam Turner, really take this rookie quarterback and is able to mold him into the face of the franchise. Love to get Tom Manning back as the tight ends coach. I think when you get Tom Manning in that room with Jelani Woods, Kylan Granson, and Drew Ogletree, you're going to see a huge jump from all three of those guys. And then I think just the one that I'm unsure about is Tony Sperano, just because he hasn't been an offensive line coach before. I know Shane Steichen had a lot of good things to say about him. He's a guy that's very detailed and will hold guys accountable. So you're hoping that Sperano can kind of change the culture within that offensive line group, get them back to focusing on their fundamentals and playing nasty again, not playing so afraid and so timid like we've seen. We want that offensive line to go and punch guys in the mouth, and hopefully that Tony Sperano Jr. can kind of bring that mentality. But it's good to see that there's continuity along the defense. I'm excited to see what that group with the same coaches can kind of build on from last year. But I think overall it's a fairly good group. A lot of young guys, a lot of young coaches on this staff or fairly inexperienced coaches, but I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's going to be a bunch of new voices. You're going to have a new vibe within that locker room, and I really think that is something that these guys could use, quite frankly. So we'll see how it plays out. But that's our show for this evening, guys. You guys were awesome once again. Can't thank you guys enough. I'm gonna check the subscribers again real quick just to see. Hey, we're up to 970 now, so 30 subscribers away. Can we be at 1,000 by Monday's episode? If we can, hey, I might be bald by then. We'll have to see. But again, I'm going to shout you guys all out: DSG Goodbar, Logan Schmidt, Colts Loyalist, Stats Matt, Nomadic Brian, Camden, Lawrence, Zach, Wyatt Law, Rich, all of you guys that were just always make our show so much fun. Can't forget Steve in there. And if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow Horseshoe Huddle on Twitter at Colts on FN. And again, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that bell so you know whenever we're going live, whenever Destin and Shot are going live. So close to 1,000 subscribers, and we really do appreciate it. Drake, before we get out of here real quick, what are some things that you've been working on for horseshoehuddle.com that people can go ahead and go read?
Well, I just finished my helping a Colts rookie quarterback. Compliments to Andrew for the title. But it highlights each individual lineman from left tackle to right tackle. Braden Smith releases tomorrow, so go check those out. And then I'm going to be releasing something on why Shane Steichen has the most pressure of any recent Colts coach to succeed.
Awesome. And then, like I mentioned, my first mock draft of the year dropped on Wednesday. Go ahead and check that out. I also had a piece earlier in the week talking about how CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson really impressed the Colts at the Combine this weekend. So you can check that out as well. But go follow Drake at DWalster You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL. And we will be back Monday night as free agency starts. And we'll talk about some free agents from the outside that might be joining the Colts in 2023. So until then, have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.